But speaking of Jim, we have Jim Bacon of Bacon's Rebellion. The Jefferson Council does a lot of investigative work relative to my friends up at dear old UVA. Jim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Jim. Great to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at some of your recent articles, one of which relates to a job fair for students relative to, I guess, jobs, internships, outside of Newcomb Hall, a location I remember well from my days in Charlottesville. But apparently some pro-Palestinian protesters showed up. Tell us what happened.
Well, this is a group was called the Dissenters, and they're just I think they're just a kind of general all-around far-left group who align themselves. They've definitely been part of the pro-Palestinian coalition, but in this case, they were working under their own name as opposed to the pro-Palestinians. But anyway, their cause is they have a big problem with it, the military-industrial complex and the war industry. In other words, the defense contractors who supply weapons to Israel. So that's the object of their ire. And so there's a job fair every semester, I guess. Certainly there was one in about 3 weeks ago. This fall, and they had about 60 or 70 corporations and government groups and things like that would come and set up booths, and students can come by and talk to them, interview them, and line up internships and jobs and things like that. So the dissenters they set up a big table outside Newcomb Hall and had a big banner that says, "Will you work for murderers?" Well, of course, that's their right to do that. Okay, so people are allowed to protest, and but it got a little bit more problematic. Is they had this they set up a reward for the people who could go in and I guess pretend to be interested in finding out more about particularly General Dynamics. That was the main defense contractor there. Find out more about employment there, and then just kind of waste as much time of the recruiter's time as possible, and tie them up so no one else could talk to them. And the idea was just to make it an absolute fruitless endeavor. Well, okay, in terms of on the grand scale of 1 to 10, in terms of bad things that leftist students can do, this certainly is kind of down towards the bottom, but they did succeed, and they posted on Instagram every time someone said, I wasted 8 minutes of this guy's time, and someone else said, I wasted 22 minutes of this guy's time. And that just, antisocial behavior, and it's disrespectful to not only the recruiters, of course, which they meant to be, but the other students who might want to consider.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem there is you're denying a student possibly an opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody and really get an opportunity for a career, quite possibly. Do you think with the incoming Trump administration, are we likely to have more protests or fewer? And I guess some of that might depend on what happens over in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, that's a really tough one to predict. I will tell you, I mean, on the one hand, you would think that the last time Trump was elected, back in 2016, there was just this wave of militancy across the country, including college campuses. And the resistance formed, and there were big mass demonstrations in Washington and so on. And that doesn't seem to be happening yet. I mean, it might, but so there's a different tenor, and there's definitely a different tenor at UVA and the other Virginia college campuses too. I mean, I have heard nothing out of VCU. People are kind of like shell shocked, I guess, and they've kind of like been seeking mental health counseling and access to comfort animals, and UVA provides all that. Yeah,
so, I know there were some universities that canceled classes for a day or two after the election to deal with the disappointment apparently some students were feeling. One other story you wrote recently was about a finance committee, the Board of Visitors meeting with Robert Blue. talking about tuition rates, room and board, and you sort of indicated there weren't a whole lot of questions asked, which leads me to the question, how would you appraise the Youngkin appointees at this stage, given that they're in the majority now?
Well, yes. I mean, I have to say, we at the Jefferson Council, we had kind of hoped to see more vigorous action at this point in time. Youngkin now has 13 appointees out of 17 on the board. So, I mean, his appointees dominate the board. The rector is still a Northern holdover, so he's the guy who creates the agenda and draws up the agenda and says, this is what we're going to talk about. And the only way to change that is for the members of the board to get together and say, well, we're getting rid of you. And there has been no move to do that yet. And also the head of the finance committee, which is the most important committee because they decided this is how much UVA spends or where they spend it and how much they can charge in tuition. That is Bob Blue, who's the head of Dominion. So he's also a Northern holdover. So it's amazing. Here we are. We're nearly almost 3 years completed in the Youngkin administration, and the board is structured in such a way that the Northern people still basically run the show. And the problem is that apparently there are some people among the Youngkin appointees who want to be much more aggressive, but there's other people who just kind of, they don't want to rock the boat. And the hints and insinuations that I hear, and hardly authoritative, but is that the Youngkin's people have been telling the ultras, I guess, to tamp it down. He doesn't want it to get ugly. But I don't see how you bring about any kind of real change at UVA, which is this huge, ponderous bureaucratic mass, which has all this bureaucratic momentum, and they have a very definite way of doing things, and all change is absolutely incremental. I don't know how you change anything unless you're willing to get unpleasant.
Yeah, you're right. I think a lot of us were hoping for a little bit more from the Youngkin majority board. But let me ask you this. We just spoke about President Trump becoming the actual president again on January 20th. There's a lot of talk about changes or maybe even elimination of the Department of Education. All these universities have what I call university bloat, all the administrators, I think largely to oversee various federal programs. Do you see some major changes coming to UVA and other colleges as a result of the incoming Trump administration's education department?
Well, I tell you what, I would love to see is Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy come down to Charlottesville.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think they could. I think it could accomplish some real good. But no, I really look. There's going to be so much pushback and so much resistance, and the system is so. The federal government is so huge and ponderous and bureaucratic, and the Republican Party itself is kind of like the Youngkin Board of Visitors. It's divided. I mean, you have people who are, rah, cut, and then there are other people who go, well, let's gotta be more judicious about this, and so I really don't. The idea of getting rid of the Department of Education, I'd be astonished if it happened. I mean, I'm certainly no prognosticator of these things, but I would be amazed. So I really don't expect much to happen. If anything, it would be if they tackle the student debt situation. I mean, that is massive, and it is just the continual shoveling of money into kids who borrow. Endless borrowing, and that's what keeps the whole edifice afloat. And that allows these universities, not just UVA, but all universities pretty much, to just continue adding, charging what they will, because they're just going to load up on the students on debt. And as long as they can continue doing that, they have no real incentive to change.
Yeah, but I got you may. This may be an unfair question, but you may know what is the percentage of the UVA budget that comes from the state of Virginia now?
I don't have the exact figures on.
But is it under 20%? I can't remember, but
It's in, yeah. So UVA gets huge amounts of money from all these different pots, but among the pot that basically pays for undergraduate student education, it's about 20% or so in that ballpark.
Yeah, they get a lot of control for a small segment of the money. So that's good for the Commonwealth, I guess, if you want it that way. But at any rate, Jim, I know a lot of us really appreciate what you do to sort of do a little oversight of UVA, and we thank you for your time. And I know John and Dan really appreciate your coming on every week. So you have a good day and a great week, and they will talk to you soon.
Well, thank you, Jim. We'll do our best to keep them honest.
All right, Jim Bacon of Bacon's
Thanks, Jim.
Rebellion, the Jefferson Council.